go.
Are we on?
Starting soon.
Yes, we are. We're in the Teams meeting now. So Cam should mute you guys.
We are a pretty unique group because we have deep technical knowledge and we have a lot of broad business knowledge. And our approach is to try to bring those things together.
There's like the HR talent experience team, and then there's the IT team, and they're always butting heads like this. Prime for siloed people, cliques, and people talking around each other, and there being rumors, so it doesn't feel like a cohesive team a lot of the time.
The team that's focused solely on traditional IT is not positioned well to help with how technology could be more strategically used in the business, right? They care about desktop support and making sure that the network is secure.
Giving them a tool doesn't make someone successful. Being able to use that tool to solve a business problem is what makes them successful.
Where we tend to focus is kind of that layer above, where we try to take all of those technology and those tools that you have as an organization and help you leverage them at that business user level so that you're effectively accomplishing your mission in the most efficient way possible.
Because you want every employee, from a person who's managing an office all the way to somebody out in the field or even executive level, you want all of them to be working together.
How do we optimize them? How do we bring them into a technology world where it can do things for us instead of relying on a manual process?
What I care about is that you have the right tool for the job. And so to that end, we're gonna evaluate that and tell you, no, don't do it with that tool. If you're able to use technology more effectively, the people that are supposed to be focused on the mission of the organization can actually do more missional things because the tech is handling the rest.
Having a successful outcome of the project, there's no question that we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. We set ourselves up as an organization that is our focus. That's our guiding light. And so it pervades everything we do. All Digital helps organizations transform their business using technology.
We help businesses use technology better so that their people work better together.
Hey, everybody. I'm Mike. This is Matt. This is the second time I think we've flown together on this ride. Welcome to November office hours. We're already November. Thanksgiving is staring us in the face. and the rest of the holidays. Mm-hmm. All right, so if you're new, let us know where you're from. Post in the chat. We're always interested to hear who joins us and where you're from. And then also, if you have any questions, this is basically a place for you to ask technical questions or even high-level strategy questions about how you're using technology for your organization. Nothing's really off limits in that regard, so post those questions in chat. I think we have a couple questions in Slack that we can that came from over the last month that we can get started with. But yeah, post those questions in chat and welcome.
April from Arlington.
Arlington, Virginia, nice. All right, I'm going to dig into our first question first. So we had a question posted from Lou. He said, as a citizen developer, I've really found your videos insightful. They've helped me spot where I need to build a stronger foundation in understanding how all these elements integrate. That said, I'm looking to get a clearer grasp on the fundamentals of application lifecycle management, otherwise known as ALM, and the process of creating environments and solutions in Microsoft 365. In short, I'd appreciate any guidance or resources on best practices so I can ensure what I build is both scalable and sustainable. I really value the platform and just want to make sure I'm doing things the right way from the start. I look forward to next month's office hours. Thanks so much for your help. Great question. So this one's kind of up my alley, I would say. So in terms of setting up ALM, let's start at a kind of really high level. You should plan on having a dedicated environment to run all of your application lifecycle management, so your solution pipelines. And that's where that stuff should run out of. So if you're not familiar, the Power Platform has built-in pipeline deployment capability now. So you can actually, from any environment that you're in, you can right-click on a solution, and there's a little rocket ship icon that allows you click that, and it will deploy using pipelines that are available and connected to that environment. So you'll need to have an ALM environment set up with those pipelines configured, and you can have multiple different pipelines configured in that environment that can facilitate deployment for different sets of target environments. And so when we talk about ALM and doing it the right way, you're likely going to have a dev environment that's dedicated, which is the place where you're going to do all of your real build work, your development. You're going to have, aside from that, you're going to have one or more target environments. And so a target environment is a destination for where you're deploying that solution. So that might be a test environment or another validation environment. It might also be a production environment. And so you'll start in your dev environment. You'll right-click and deploy your solution, and then that ALM environment, which is a whole separate environment that has those pipelines, will basically package up all of that content that's in your dev environment that's connected to that solution that you're choosing to deploy. It'll export that automatically. It actually stores it away as a solution package for you, which is kind of nice, so you can keep track of that. You have the option to configure your pipelines for approvals and all sorts of extra bells and whistles. But then ultimately, once it packages that up, it will take that and ship it to your target environment, wherever that is. And so that might be test or production. And if you are doing a full ALM lifecycle, so dev, test, and prod, after you go to test, someone will hopefully review those features, bug fixes, and whatnot, and then approve the next deployment to the next target environment, which would be the production environment. So that's kind of the ALM side of it. The other twist or thing that I would add to all of that is think of when you are setting up your environments, think of them in terms of what their purpose is. So everyone that gets into Microsoft 365 is going to start with a default environment, which is basically the hub of all Power Platform stuff for personal use. So it's where your end users can create their own personal flows and do personal automation and things like that from it. I don't recommend building mission critical solutions in that environment. You should declare a dedicated environment or set of environments. But then once you start down that road and you have a dedicated environment, let's say dev, test, and prod for a particular purpose, you might end up with another particular application or solution that is completely different and not even adjacent to what you built. And so you might want to have another set of dedicated environments for that purpose as well. So you just need to be thinking about those things in terms of separation of concerns. What are they doing for your organization, and who is accessing them? So security is often one of the big reasons for separating those things. Hopefully that was a helpful answer. I know it was a bit long-winded, but that's kind of where I would start.
I want to add to what Lou asked, just because he's looking to get a grasp on the fundamentals, and I noticed there's some step one beginners here in the chat. Like, what's an issue with if you don't set up some of those environments? Like, you're kind of outlining the whole process of dev, test, prod. Some people might not be aware of what those things are for. So what are some like common issues or cataclysmic events that can happen if you don't do something like that?
Yeah, that's actually a great follow-up. So without that in place, you might find yourself building a solution or an application in the target environment, so in a production environment, which there's a problem with that, there's actually several problems with it. One of the problems is going to be somebody's going to say, oh, I really would like you to change this application to do X instead of Z, right? And, well, you say, okay, I'm going to go make that change. I'm going to make it do X instead of Z. And you actually have to make that change in an environment where somebody, one or more users, might actually be using the application at the time you're making the change. So then you publish the change, and all of a sudden the app changes, and they don't know it was going to happen. And maybe you broke something, and now the app doesn't work at all, and so they're dead in the water. So that's one of the real risks associated with not setting up full ALM or dev, test, prod scenario. That's probably one of the biggest ones. And then the other thing that you can achieve with a full ALM lifecycle is you can actually facilitate better collaboration in solutions and on applications. So having developers work on the same solution is enabled I guess it's more robust because they can develop in a dev environment, in their own dev environment actually, and push those changes to a validation environment before they get to the next step. So you basically expand your resource pool, if you will. So we don't have to like, oh, are you working on the app right now? Or are you working on that flow? Oh, let me know when you're out so I can go work on it. You can actually work on those things in separate dev environments, and then those things can be merged together through that process as well. So you expand your throughput a little bit, increase your capacity and efficiency.
Cool. I think Lou was happy with that.
Love the question. Cool. So I think we have something posted in the Teams chat. So A.R. Pennington says, I'm interested in learning more about building model-driven Power Apps, specifically about building conditional branching logic into the business process flow within the Power App. I'm a step one beginner here, trying to build a variance analysis process. Programs plan a baseline, and any deviation from the monthly baseline is explained in a variance analysis report. Ooh, good question. This, I'm trying to think of the easiest way to explain this. So business process flows are a unique component, a specific type of component within the Power Platform that can be used only in model-driven apps. Now, technically, you can use them with other external, like you could use them with a flow. You can actually call basically into Dataverse and do bound or unbound actions and get at business process flows. And you can do other things to use that particular process and advance it as well. But as like out of the box, the way that they're intended to be used is within a model-driven app. And kind of in a nutshell is the business process flow is basically a series of steps during which you're collecting data or maybe kicking off a particular action or a process or a flow. And once one step is complete, you move to the next step and so on and so forth. And you can branch within those steps. So if a user's response to a particular question is yes instead of no, for example, you can choose to go in a different branch within that business process flow. And then the other thing that I would note is that the business process flows are actually connected to a specific entity and can be connected to more than one entity. So for example, when you're in your model-driven app and you're viewing let's say an account record, you might have a business process flow that's tied to the account record. If you have that published, then that business process will appear at the top in a banner on that record that you're looking at. And so then you can initiate that process and start working through that process. But if you get to a point in that process where you need to leap over into another entity, for example, you can actually leap to another business process, let's say for the contact entity, if you wanted to collect more details about a particular contact, and it'll start and enter a new business process and change that banner. You'll be looking at the contact record and so on and so forth. And so you can actually navigate cross business processes depending on what your requirements are. But basically that feature, that user experience and that user interface that is there for business process flows is primarily built in as an out-of-the-box feature of model-driven apps. But I can attest, we have used it in other applications within Canvas apps. We've built a custom connector once upon a time that leverages the business process flow so that we could actually guide a user through the same process in a Canvas app on a mobile device as a way to step through that process. And it was a highly custom user experience in that case. All right. And then it looks like AR has another question. A fundamental question I have is what information is relevant and needed in each individual table? I know overall what information needs to be in Dataverse, but I don't know how to organize it in tables to be pulled into the business process flow stages and steps.
So you mentioned that business process flows are specific to model-driven apps. I wonder if that speaks to some of it.
Well, so in this case, the question is how do I get those elements into the elements of a table? How do I build them in, or how do I pull them into the business process flow stages and steps? I think that's the gist of the question. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, the business process flow is connected to a specific entity. And so then once you have that connected to a specific entity, then all of the fields that are available, the columns that you have defined for that entity, can become available within the stage steps within that business process flow. I think is kind of the short answer to that question. right. I feel like we're cruising right along.
Yeah.
Just for those, I'll reset. If you have any questions in either on the YouTube side or on the team side, feel free to post them in chat, and we will pick those up. And then, as always, if you haven't posted where you're from, feel free to do that. We're always interested in finding out where people are joining from. All right. I'm going to jump over to another question that we had on the 20th. Let's see. Okay, so a licensing question. Power Platform related. Okay, a lot of Power Platform stuff today. I feel like this is right up my alley. So this Tabriz says they're stuck in licensing aspects of Power Platform. They have around 70 users and want to develop applications on the Microsoft 365 platform, so Power Apps, with the least licensing impact. So that's a good question. So there's a couple different flavors of Power Apps that you could consider. If you want to do the least licensing impact, meaning free, so get what you pay for just with your Microsoft 365 license, the easiest approach is going to be do something with like SharePoint as your data backend, maybe Excel as a data backend, but then build everything in Canvas apps. So if you're doing that, it's all free. And you can get quite far with that approach. But I would say if you're getting yourself into a scenario where it's, if it's a core app in your business or a core process that you're trying to run, mission critical, is important, it might make sense to justify the investment and consider switching over to using Dataverse as your backend, and then giving yourself the ability to create what are called model-driven apps. I've got a video out there. We can probably dig it up and post a link in the chat. But there's a video out there that basically talks about the costs of building model-driven apps and whether or not it's actually worth it. And I think, it doesn't take a whole lot to justify building a model-driven app for a mission-critical purpose. There is a license cost associated to it. So I believe the last time I looked, the Power Apps per user license is $20 a month per user. However, if you want to make that even cheaper, you can buy what are called basically seat licenses or app licenses. And that is a license, you can buy a pack of them. Let's say you buy 10 of them. Those are 10 licenses that get assigned to a specific environment and then get assigned to users who use a specific app. And those are $5 a month per app per user. So then that can become quite a bit cheaper if you just have a single app for that purpose. But if you have, if you do the math, 70 users times $5 a month per user, like that can add up pretty quick. However, I will tell you from experience that building a model-driven app and maintaining a model-driven app is 10x less effort overall than Canvas apps. Everything is what you see is what you get. So even in the Canvas apps world, it is no code, low code. But you're going to spend a lot more time moving pixels around, moving icons around and controls around, and tweaking things and adding specific expressions to validate data input and things like that. Whereas on the model-driven app side, you're going to focus more on your data structure and defining the definition of your columns and whether or not a field is required or what type of data it is, and then you just let the model-driven app infrastructure handle all of the rest of the stuff. The data validation, the form is going to be what it's going to be. You're going to move your columns around on the form and change the layout a little bit, but it's not going to be highly custom look and feel. But you're going to save all kinds of time depending on what your application is, but you're likely going to save a lot of effort in the long run simply building model-driven apps and biting the bullet and paying for those licenses. That's kind of what I would say. The other benefit you'll get from that down the road is overall Dataverse is going to be a much more manageable data platform. If your solution or your application ends up having like gobs and gobs and gobs of data, thousands of rows of data, SharePoint is not going to be a great place to do that from. Excel is not going to be a great place to do that from. You're going to want something more robust, and Dataverse certainly would be a great option for that.
I was going to follow up and ask, like, it sounds like you're making the case for starting with model-driven apps if you're new to Power Apps, just because you're working tangibly with something that's kind of built for you. I think a lot of people are tempted by starting out on a blank canvas app and only adding what they think they need, but you can kind of get lost.
Yeah, it's really interesting that Microsoft did what they did. I think, you know, the licensing the licensing play that Microsoft made is that the real value is in Dataverse and connecting to that, and so that's what they had to tie the license to. But I do think that from a overall, like, if I'm creating a business app for use in an organization, I can build a business app as a model-driven app in, you know, 3 hours as opposed to 3 days with a Canvas app. I mean, it's quite a bit different, can be quite a bit quicker, and so it's interesting that, you know, that's how Microsoft started. Is like, here's the free one. It's a little bit tricky to use. I feel like they could have hooked people a lot faster if they would have given them access to model-driven apps right off the bat. But even in the free Dataverse, so Dataverse for Teams, that was you know, in vogue for a little bit, you couldn't build model-driven apps on that either. So
Yeah.
Yep.
The other common saying I've heard is, do you want it to look pretty or do you want it to work? As it pertains to customizing and finessing something on the Canvas style app versus having it just work for you.
Yeah, I mean, Canvas apps can be nice for, you know, making it pretty, if you want to add like logos and all kinds of stuff like that. Now, when it comes to like custom functionality that is in Canvas apps that isn't out of the box in a model-driven app, like, everyone remember, you can build in that custom functionality in a Canvas app and then embed that Canvas app in your model-driven app. So you can have kind of the best of both worlds there. All right. Another question from Tanya. Hi, Tanya. Long time no see. How does licensing work with either Power BI published to the web or a Power App published to the web for subscribers to use and view? That's a good question. So on the Power BI front, there's a few different ways that you're going to license things. And like, in all reality, Power BI is free until you get to the point where you actually need to share a report with somebody. And that goes for both internal and external users. So if you're thinking about internal users, users need to have a Power BI Pro license or premium license. I forget what it is. Everything's flipping to Fabric now. In order for you to be able to like share stuff in a workspace with them, or share it, for example, embed it in SharePoint on a SharePoint page or something like that, for example, they'll need to have, you know, some form of paid license. And then in terms of licensing for sharing with external users, there's a couple different options. There's basically a premium capacity that you can assign to a workspace in Power BI or in Fabric that will allow you to embed reports that are in that workspace in something like a Power Pages portal, which would be for external user consumption potentially. Could be internal as well, but if you wanted to actually embed something in something like a Power Pages portal, you would use that type of licensing. And then in addition to that, there's also an embedded license, which you can purchase, which basically allows you to embed Power BI components in a custom application, basically with code. And so that would be another option. Both of those, I don't know the pricing off the top of my head. It is based on how you size the environment in terms of horsepower. When it comes, that's what ultimately determines that price, but it is quite a bit pricier once you get to that sharing with external users level, for sure. Oh, looks like Livy found my video. All right. AR had another follow-up question. Can't you make model-driven Power Apps pretty by building custom pages? Yes, you can. So you can. You can't do all the things you can do in a Canvas app on a custom page, but you can do quite a bit. We use both Canvas app and custom pages to do a variety of custom things inside of the model-driven app world. But even in those scenarios, I wouldn't. The reason we ended up doing those things isn't to make it pretty. Pretty is in the business world is Not always the first priority. Like, yes, we like things to look nice and we like things to be intuitive, but more often than not, we're doing it because we need to capture data in a very specific way, use a camera control, maybe a map, maybe include a Power BI report with some other widgets. There's a variety of, additional things or additional functionality that we're typically trying to incorporate within that model-driven app usually. Is where our need has come from. Sure, you can make things pretty with that, but you got to remember that the rest of your model-driven app is going to still be a model-driven app and have some limitation. Good question, though. All right. Looks like Lou has a follow-up. He said, you mentioned before that you faced some frustrations when you first moved over to Dataverse. Yes. I'm running into a bit of that myself, especially around understanding how to connect and relate tables effectively. Based on your experience, what are your top recommendations for making that transition smoother? Any lessons learned on how to best structure the Dataverse as a backend would be really helpful. I really appreciate any insights you can share. Yeah, so this is an interesting question because building in Dataverse, I think, has changed quite a bit in the last several months. So now Copilot is actually like the default place that people get started. Like, tell me what you want to do, and I'll design your database for you. And if you're a data nut like me, and you care about how your data looks, and that's kind of the world or the background that you have, what Copilot throws together is usually not adequate and can be a bit frustrating. So that's some of the frustration now. And what I typically do to work around that is I will flip over to the older user experience, so you can still get in and within the solution, you can build your own tables and add relationships. The easiest relationship to build is simply add a lookup column to another table. So that could be a one-to-one or a one-to-many type relationship. Once you get into things like many-to-many relationships, then you can build many-to-many relationships, but sometimes those have limitations that you might want to overcome, which you can do if you build your own custom many-to-many table. So a junction table, if you will, is what it was used to be known as, or an intersect table. If you build your own custom intersect table, you get some of the extra benefits that come with normal Dataverse tables, including all of the audit fields, so created by, modified by, created on, modified on. If you let Dataverse manage that intersect table for you by simply creating the many-to-many relationship, you won't get those audit fields. So that's something to pay attention to. I think there's one other limitation that I ran into recently that would be worth mentioning, but I can't recall it at the moment. But yeah, I did have frustration early on when I first started playing with Dataverse and with model-driven apps. It seemed the studio in the environment itself seemed a little bit foreign to me, and it took me a little bit to grasp the concepts in terms of just application, like the navigation and how that was structured. And of course that changed. And at the time we were in and out of classic experience versus the unified experience in terms of, editing our applications. And so that was a bit frustrating as well. And so once I got a handle on what things were and where I needed to go to edit certain things, it certainly got a lot easier. And that's a lot of the reason that we produce a lot of the content that we do. It's a lot of the reason that we do office hours is because we had some of that frustration when that world first came into existence ourselves. And, once we got over it, it was like, wow, this is great. I wish everybody could be here. Mm-hmm. And so then that's a lot of reason that we teach what we do. All right.
Got some YouTube.
You know what we need? We need some SharePoint questions.
I know. I like hearing you talk about power.
I'm losing my voice though. I've been talking all day. All right, which you can probably hear that in my voice. Thumbs up if you can hear me losing my voice.
It's the season too. Just blame it on allergies or the changing climate. Got somebody from Alaska. Mm-hmm. Whitaker, Alaska. Shelby.
All right.
There we go.
Whittier. Whittier. I wonder where Whittier is. I'm going to have to go check that out.
Must be
Love that somebody's from Alaska. I want to go to Alaska. I got to get a trip planned. All right, so question from Callum. Sorry if this is answered. From a corporate point of view, are we supposed to and dictated to use the traditional low-code apps for flows, data analysis, and so on within organizations, and Power Apps for personal
use, probably.
Okay, so let me think about this question because I'm trying to understand it. So, supposed to use traditional low-code apps for flows. Okay, so I think the question is there a differentiation in terms of, like, can I use Power Apps for personal or for corporate things? And I think there's a question here about, like, what are considered the traditional low-code apps for flows. So I would say that from a Power Platform standpoint, you can build any number of flows or Power Apps for your own personal use, and it largely depends on the license that your organization has purchased for you. And when I say personal, I still mean personal within the context of the organization, right? Obviously, if you're logged in with a Microsoft account, it's a work or school account, and you're building a flow or a Power App, yes, it's personal in that it makes your job better, but it is still something that the organization owns. Typically, you'll do that in, like, the default environment. A good example of where you might be using Power Apps and maybe not really know it is if you're creating a custom SharePoint list form. You can do that with Canvas app, and that's kind of something that automatically gets plugged into that default environment. But all of those things could be for personal use. I would say that there is a point at which, like, if more than one person is using that app, or if more than one person is on the receiving end of whatever a Power Automate flow is doing, you might want to consider moving that into a solution or a place that can be shared or managed better with more people, managed better by the organization. That might mean moving it into a dedicated environment or another shared environment outside of the default environment, but ultimately that's something that every organization can determine differently. One little word of caution: if you find yourself wanting to build model-driven apps and make changes or add tables to Dataverse, and you're doing it in the default environment, don't. That's a no-no. The default environment is the environment that everybody inherits when they wake up in the morning and log into Microsoft 365. And if you're making changes to things in Dataverse in the default environment, you are making changes not only to things that other people may expect to work a certain way, but you're also making changes to some of the underlying subsystem that Microsoft uses to run a lot of its other tools. So just one example of that would be approvals. So if you're familiar with approvals in Teams and requesting an approval, all of that data runs through the Dataverse instance that is in the default environment. And so if by some chance you've been given enough permissions to manipulate Dataverse in your default environment, and you go monkey around with the approvals tables because you think you're going to do something cool, you could be doing some serious damage. So just don't do that. That's kind of off limits. If you find yourself needing to do something like that, stand up a new dedicated environment for your purpose. And if you enable Dataverse in that environment, it will come with all of those out-of-the-box tables, including the approval stuff, and you can go tweak that stuff to your heart's content, and you won't impact the underlying baseline functionality that everybody is expecting out of Microsoft 365. All right. Central New Jersey. So we got some more people from the East Coast. All right. Next question. What recent update in Microsoft 365 are you most excited about? Guess what? I'm going to let you answer this one first.
Okay. Man, we kind of talk about all sorts of stuff throughout every couple of weeks when we see new updates coming out. It kind of becomes a big office conversation. as you know, I'm big on SharePoint, so I always tend to follow a lot of the SharePoint news and things that are coming out mostly on the SharePoint side. I think there's been a lot of talk and I think some fatigue on Copilot and just AI in general over the last year or so. That just it's such a hot topic. But one of the things that came out more recently, I think we might have discussed it last time I was on, but Copilot agents or SharePoint agents. So that's been really, really exciting to see Microsoft roll out something that's kind of encapsulated. It's this packaged version of Copilot that applies as a SharePoint site agent, something that turns on. I think one of the biggest requests that I myself, and I think some of us here have gotten from the SharePoint side from clients are, how do I make a bot? How do I set something up like a suggestion bot or something that kind of pipes up when a user lands on a page that can do frequently asked questions, get contact directory information, or ask about the site so that they can learn to navigate it. And I think that's kind of where Microsoft brought Copilot into to create these agents that now you can customize and create from scratch. So not only are they introducing this other tool that you have to learn how to use, but they're kind of creating these templates of these agents for your SharePoint site, and it helps articulate where the agent goes, what information the agent has access to. And I think seeing those and playing with those helps teach you how it fundamentally works so that you can kind of take it to the next level too. So that's where I've been spending a lot of my time on.
I think mine is Copilot too. A little bit different though. Copilot in conjunction with all of the Microsoft apps, and in particular, like just most recently, I was playing with. I built out a Microsoft Forms based demo, and so I was building like a retreat registration form. Like people submit their stuff, and so I like built out the form, and I like added my questions and stuff like that. And that experience right now in Microsoft Forms is very, very Copilot is all over the place within that experience. And so it's basically proactively analyzing what you constructed in your form, or at least what I constructed in my form. And then we have Copilot has 4 suggestions for your form.
Yeah.
And would you like to check them out? And you can step through those things. You're like, oh, I like this one, or let me see what that one looks like. And if you don't like it, you can go back and do something different. And basically it turned into, like very quickly for me, Copilot is so powerful in that Microsoft Forms application, in that tool, that it like basically improved my form like tenfold. And I realized the next time I create a form, I'm going to start with Copilot and see where that goes. But super powerful, saved a bunch of time, made it more, made it flow better, made it more user friendly, ask questions in a different way. It was very, very helpful.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see tools like that not only help you generate that content or do quick configuration and save hours and hours of just building time, but then AI is also getting feedback from users, right? People are responding to this agent or to this form, and they're going to be able to collect data of what the users are prompting them for. Like, as when you create an agent, you're kind of putting the prompts in and saying these are suggestions that you would ask when you land on this site or on this form. But ultimately, you're probably going to be able to get a lot of analytical data and be able to iterate on those things as they get populated by your users too.
Yeah. Copilot's super powerful. I mentioned it in a video I've got coming out, and you just mentioned it too, as far as a SharePoint agent. So Copilot being kind of a bot that you can converse with on your organization's intranet or any other SharePoint site. You can ask it questions, and honestly, AI bots are becoming the new search. So anybody who's familiar with SharePoint knows that the index and search capability of SharePoint is highly powerful, very useful, but now combine that with a conversational element, it just becomes a whole new level of user experience for your people, which is way better. Like, it's great to search, but having a conversation with a human is like the best. The next best thing is having a conversation with something that's human-like, and that's what a Copilot agent inside of a SharePoint site can do.
Yeah.
Really cool. All right, we've got a few more questions, it looks like. So Elliot says, I work in flooring distribution, and so few distributors have CRMs for managing tasks, emails. Do you have any suggestions on how to use Outlook, Power Apps to keep track of conversations or tasks with customers? Ooh, that's a good question. If you want to spend some money, Microsoft's CRM is based on Dataverse, and so you can basically purchase Dynamics. There's sales and customer service, field service. There's a few different flavors or SKUs for Dynamics. It is not cheap. It's $100, $120 per user per month type of a thing. So that can be quite expensive, but it has all of those built-in CRM functions just already there out of the box. So it'll equip your sales team to do their job. It can equip your customer service team to do their jobs, handle work orders, like all of that stuff is built into that platform. And so that would be definitely someplace to look. If not now, maybe in the future as you grow, you can justify that type of license cost. If you're not ready to go there yet, I think one of the first places I would look would be, well, maybe I don't need all of those bells and whistles, but I could benefit from having a database that has some of those basic constructs in it for managing accounts and contacts and tasks and cases or work orders and things like that. And so you could stand up a dedicated environment for this purpose, do it the ALM way, dev test prod kind of a thing, turn on Dataverse in that environment, and right out of the box, you'll have a bunch of data structure already there to help you manage things like accounts, contacts, tasks, like all of that stuff is just built in out of the box. And so then you can add functionality on top of that data structure in the form of a model-driven app or Canvas apps that would allow you to accomplish a variety of those things. So if you're managing accounts and you need to, add contacts to an account, like it's a simple model-driven app. There's tasks and activities built in for setting meetings and all of that kind of stuff. You would just have to build the functionality in the app yourself or multiple apps on top of that. And if you did that, that would be, as low as $5 per user per app per month could be a good way to go. So I don't know how large your organization is, but that could be relatively cost effective for a fairly robust solution. The thing to note there in terms of tasks and emails and those types of things is you'd have to know a little bit more to get this stuff enabled, but there are features that you can enable for that environment that will connect it to your mailbox. So you can actually do a little bit of official CRM and sync mailboxes to it, which is something that an admin for that environment can do in the back end and approve. So you can do things that way. But then in terms of other things like tasks and notifications and appointments and things like that, all of that can be integrated as well. Users can get notifications. If you want extra workflow on top of that, you can always incorporate your own custom, Power Automate flows to do anything that you need to do there. But that would definitely be a good place to start. I would, if this is for work, I would plan on spending a little bit of money for the licenses because it'll be worth it in the long run as opposed to, trying to wrestle with something like SharePoint as a back end and things like that. All right, and then there's a follow-up to Elliot's question. What can we tell you about choosing custom apps versus Microsoft CRM solutions, the whole Dynamics series options? So I think I might maybe just kind of told you. The important thing to note is that all of the underlying data structure that supports the features of the Dynamics applications is generally there. It's built into Dataverse whenever you enable Dataverse or turn Dataverse on in a Power Platform environment. And so you can use those tables. You can customize those tables to meet your needs. You can add new tables, all that kind of stuff. You would just need to build your own custom apps on top of it, which if you like doing that stuff, maybe that's something that you want to do. But that can be a pretty cost-effective way to get, start with a baseline and then build the functionality you need on top. Because not everybody needs the full-blown, field service or customer service feature set right off the bat. They are nice, but it can be overkill. It can be a lot to bite off. All right. Elliot followed up, said they don't use a Microsoft CRM. He just has Outlook and SharePoint and Teams. Yeah, so if you have those things, you don't have the CRM, but you do have access to the Power Platform, at least right now. Assuming you're paying for just a standard Microsoft 365 license, You can use all of the free parts and pieces of the Power Platform, but it might be worth investigating, upping at least your license and playing with Dataverse and model-driven apps to try to accomplish the goals that you have. Honestly, you could probably stand up, excuse me, you could probably stand up a basic application to track all of that stuff as a good first start, like in a week, or less. So, all right. Elliot's got the follow-ups. He used HubSpot and closed CRM in the past and could email and manage follow-up tasks from one window. Having a hard time not being able to mark any emails or tasks for follow-up in Outlook alone. Yeah, so that's where that syncing your mailboxes thing would be beneficial. So when you have that Power Platform environment stood up and you have Dataverse there, again, in the back end, you can sync the users that are enabled or added to that environment. You can sync their mailboxes in that environment, and that communication will automatically get associated to the contacts that match that communication in that environment, or you can create new contacts, but then you can actually even send and receive emails right out of that tool as well. But it basically tracks all of that mail in a separate data structure in Dataverse, which would be a singular place that you could actually do that. You can still work from your mailbox if you want to, but if you're actually trying to track status of work orders, or somebody made a support request and you need to go address it, you'll want to track that with something more than just email. Wait, you mean, okay, so another follow-up question. You mean the Dynamics licenses would be your recommendation? It would be my recommendation if you wanted all the bells and whistles of Dynamics. So if you had a full-blown sales organization or team, and you had customer service folks that were managing client or customer issues, and you needed to track all of that stuff and have all of the communication threads so that you could go back in time and look at all of that stuff and get all kinds of reporting and purchase orders and all of that stuff. There's tons and tons of features that are built into those Dynamics SKUs. If that's what you needed, then yeah, I would say you should at least consider purchasing Dynamics as a place to start, because it's going to save you from having to build a bunch of stuff. So if you don't want to pay for Dynamics because you're like, oh, $100 a month, that's too expensive, then you're going to either spend time building it yourself, or you're going to pay somebody like me or Matt potentially to build it for you. And so there is a cost associated. There is, nothing in this world is really free at the end of the day. But
yeah, like what he said, it actually is worth it. You can always get it done, but that's going to give you a lot more right off the get-go.
Yep. Yeah, and there may be things that you're doing in your organization. Let's say you're doing them the hard way because you don't know that there's a better way. And simply having awareness about the feature set that comes with one of the Dynamics products might put something in your brain. It's like, oh, the whole world could be better if I could just use that extra feature. Or I didn't even know something like that existed. So, not saying that you should go use it, but you should explore it as an option so that you at least know what's available to you. Cool.
I'll snag this one from Lou. He's on the Teams chat. I appreciate the SharePoint love, Lou. He says he's currently using a SharePoint list that has the average rating column. That's a column you can add to a list that gives you that 0 to 5-star rating. He's running into a bit of a limitation. It seems like each user can only provide 1 rating per row. So it's 1 row. I think he's putting people in the row, and other users are going in to rate them. And the way I believe that column works is individual users or unique users can put in 1 rating for each row. But what he's asking is the best way to structure it out so that the same person can enter multiple ratings for a certain team member across either different rows or different instances. So it's kind of that one-to-many relationship. It's not just 1 row per person, because an evaluator might evaluate somebody more than 1 time. I believe the rating column does calculate some sort of overall average, or you can take that data and calculate that, but this is obviously across many row items. He's trying to figure out if this is handled better in SharePoint or should he try and move it to a Dataverse for more flexibility. So I don't know if you have options for that.
Well, I mean, you could always
It's a
move
good use case.
this to Dataverse. I think the functionality that you're probably trying to, like, it's there in SharePoint. It's probably like there's a reason that you're doing it in SharePoint. I don't know exactly what you're rating, or if this is maybe this is like an employee 360 peer evaluation process or something like that. But simply creating multiple rows or changing your data structure to support that would be something. Like, can we have multiple rating columns on a list?
Yeah, I think so.
So like maybe
create them, yeah.
That could be an approach. I think you still may want some sort of calculation at the end of the day to average those things or combine those things or create a cumulative score potentially, which you could do with maybe a calculated column or ultimately with Power BI, because you could connect to this with Power BI as well. But that would be something to look at. Yeah, so Tanya suggested using JSON to format extra columns and then use a calculated column. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are some good options that could work.
Yeah, I think the two key fundamentals here are getting comfortable with managing these as, like you said, instances rather than just a row per person that tries to hold all that information. I don't think you can get away with that in this scenario. And then leveraging something like Power Automate, if you're familiar with that, you can take that data out and put it in. This reminds me of MS Forms a little bit too. We do polling and get feedback from people and rate things, even in our organization, that can then be taken by Power Automate and siphoned off into SharePoint lists that might become endless as some of this stuff gets calculated out.
Yeah, Tanya offered some more good suggestions. Grouping can help if there's multiple rows versus multiple columns, and then using Power Query in a tool like Excel to read the list and make whatever reports you need to make. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tanya. All right, we are 8 minutes left. We're nearing the end of our time, so if you have any last-minute questions and you want to get them in, feel free to post them. We're here to answer those. I'm going to jump back over to YouTube. Cal had another question. He said, will the traditional Power Apps be phased out, or will they have a place in the same way as Microsoft Project? Old system, but still relevant. So I don't know exactly what you mean by traditional Power Apps. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit. I don't, maybe you're referring to like the classic editor experience. I'm not exactly sure. As far as I know, Power Apps are here to stay, all flavors of them. So that includes model-driven Canvas apps. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon, so I would expect all of that stuff to be around for the foreseeable future. Yeah. Ultimately, I don't even know, like, Project isn't really phased out yet. Microsoft takes a long time to phase things out that are old. We have, like, InfoPath is still hanging on, it's finally going away.
Which you might be referring to that workflow 2012, 2016.
Could be, yeah. Like if you're talking about like SharePoint Classic workflow and InfoPath, yes, that stuff is going out of support very soon. Praise the Lord. It will be glad to see that stuff go. The day I don't have to use SharePoint Designer ever again will be a great day.
We're almost there.
Almost there.
Would incognito Chrome sessions be the best way to handle juggling multiple M365 environments as a consultant?
I actually don't use incognito for this purpose. What I do instead, this is a great question, and maybe you do something else, Matt, I don't know, but I actually have multiple browser profiles. And so at any given time, I'll have, 5, 7 different browser profiles, depending on how many customers that I'm working with. And each browser profile basically allows me to log into that customer's environment and has them, because I'll have an account in that customer's environment. That's what I log in to that browser with. And so then I can bring any of those. I'll usually bookmark those in my desktop tray so that I can bring up any customer's environment basically whenever I need to. And it loads up with all of my tabs loaded up. All I got to do is log in. And then I'm good to go. So I'm not using the incognito or in private browser session at all.
Yep. I do the same thing, probably 10 or 11 different browser profiles within Chrome that are color-coded, different logos, different names denoted by the profile that I'm using. And it seems like a lot at first, and within a week later, it's just second nature to me now.
Yeah, the biggest problem I have with it is I have a tendency to like to leave those browsers up and running. So I'll actually run them on multiple desktops, so virtual desktops. So then I can switch context and have everything for that customer in one place. And so then I'll just leave those browser sessions open, and it just chews up a lot of memory depending on what I have going on. And I'm notorious, like I'm probably second only to Matt Dressel in terms of how many browser tabs I have open. But that chews up a lot of memory, and that can bite me every once in a while, particularly when Cam has forced a Microsoft update to want to restart my machine for the last 2 weeks. Things start to like break down, and then it gets shaky, and then the next thing you know, I'm like, oh, I got to do it, and I go make some coffee while I wait for the reboot to happen. Good questions, though.
Yeah, really good stuff today. Lots of thank yous. I think we're reaching out too, hitting a lot of good points with everybody.
Good deal.
Cool, some back and forth between Tanya and Lou, talking about Bulb Circle Workplace.
Yes, Cam, my machine is very safe. Thanks to I'll tell you, I got to say, we have the best compliance team on the planet. Love those guys. They take care of us. They make sure that we're safe. Safety third. That's what I say.
The compliance team count as a safety team?
I mean, that
Kind of one and the same.
they are.
right?
They are.
Yeah.
That is what they are. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I think we'll call it. I don't see any new
Yeah.
questions coming in.
Unless something pops up last minute.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining today. It was a lot of good questions. Absolutely filled the time.
Yeah.
It was wonder about that, and all over the place too. Alaska, as far as Alaska, tuning in, we love it. Maybe we'll have to do a live stream. Livy, schedule our next live stream from Alaska. Let's do that. That'll be fun. All right. Well, thanks, Matt, for supporting me today on office hours, and shout out to Matt and Mitch who are traveling, who are off. I'll say on site this week, and couldn't join us, but they're doing good things, and a lot of exciting things happening in our world lately. We're very busy, but always a pleasure to see all of you at office hours every month. We'll do this again next month, the first Wednesday of the month. I don't know what day that is, but we'll be back here 2:00 Eastern on the first Wednesday of December, and we'll see you then. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. See you guys.